Hello everyone, we're here with the latest in our video interview series. Today chatting with director Sam Green about his documentary film 32 Sounds. 32 Sounds is an immersive documentary and profound sensory experience that explores the elemental phenomenon of sound. The film is a meditation on the power of sound to bend time, cross borders, and profoundly shape our perception of the world around us. It is also the latest in the Gig Harbor Film Festival's monthly Monday Movies series, showing on screen at the Galaxy Theater in Gig Harbor on Monday, August 28th at 6:30 p.m.
That's right, and we're really excited today to welcome the film's director and star, Sam Green. Sam is a documentary filmmaker who received his master's degree in journalism from the University of California, Berkeley, where he also studied documentary with acclaimed filmmaker Marion Riggs. Green is nominated for an Oscar for his 2004 feature-length film, The Weather Underground, which told the story of a group of radical young women and men who tried to violently overthrow the United States government during the 60s and 70s. 32 Sounds premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2022, has been touring the country ever since. And Sam joins us from his home in New York. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, Sam, as a documentary filmmaker, you've covered the gamut. You've gone from politics to the rise and fall of a man who appeared on a number of televised sporting events wearing a rainbow wig, of all things. You've also created a series of what you've called live documentaries, the latest of which is on screen in Gig Harbor later this month, 32 Sounds, which we're going to talk about here with you now. Can you tell us a little bit about how the film came about? Was there something that just kind of struck a nerve that made you want to create this?
How the 32 Sounds came about?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a long story, and I'm going to make it as short as I can. I'm still making the story shorter and pithier, but I had made a documentary about the Kronos Quartet, and it was the musical ensemble. They've been around 50 years, and it was a live cinema piece. So I narrate it, and they play the soundtrack, and it's a portrait of them. And we, had a great time doing it, and we had all these screenings scheduled for 2020. And then when the pandemic happened, they were all canceled. And so I, like many other people, was just at home and with a stack of books. I'd been interested in sound because that movie made me really sensitive to how people listen to cinema. And so I had this stack of books about sound, and I just started reading them. And in one of the books, I mentioned this in the film, in one of the books, there was a mention of a woman named Anea Lockwood, a kind of avant-garde composer, and it said she had recorded the sound of rivers for 50 years. Well, I love the sound of rivers, and I was intrigued. What kind of person? And I started Googling her. I'd never heard of Anea Lockwood, and I just was delighted. The more I read, the more I listened to her stuff on YouTube, the more interested I got. And this being like March of 2020, I just wrote her an email, at a certain point and said, "Hi, I'm interested in sound. Could I talk to you?" And she said, "Sure. How about this afternoon?" It's like, it's hard to remember those good old days when nobody was doing anything. But I was delighted by her. She's sort of the main character in the film, or one of them, and she was so smart about sound and very sunny, lovely older person. I love old people. And so we just started talking maybe once a week, and the film really came out of that. Her ideas about sound. She's such a sensitive listener, and I just found her very inspiring. She's a great muse. So that's kind of my short, as short as I can make it, version of how the film happened.
Well, you mentioned cinema sound and how that, first impacted you and got you thinking.
Yeah.
We've long discussed on our show the relationship between music, soundtracks, specifically in film, and how that impacts an audience's emotions, human emotion, at a most deepest level, really. Can you speak about what you've learned through this process of making this film about the relationship, through the creation of 32 Sounds between music and human emotion?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned so much about sound, from technical stuff about movie sound to just more kind of abstract or academic things about sound. One of the things I know now is how little I knew before about sound. And I've always been struck, well, one of the things that has struck me is that in most movies, the sound design is amazing, especially Hollywood, fiction films. Even the biggest piece of shit like romantic comedy, I don't know if we can say that word on this show. But
You're
even
fine. Oh,
the
please do.
even the dumbest, Ashton Kutcher movie, they've paid millions and millions of dollars to super professional people to do a great job with the sound. So anytime you go to a movie, you can just sit back, the sound washes over you. You don't need to work very hard with your ears. Which is both good and bad. It's delightful to have your ears be tickled like that, but you're not really listening very intently. I mean, I have learned over time that if you really want to hear things, you really got to listen. You got to put some energy into your ears and pay attention. It's work, and so I think most movies don't encourage that. They encourage a kind of passive listening. So figuring out ways, for me, one of the big challenges with this film was how to use cinema to get people to listen. It's not an easy thing, because so much of cinema is about the eye. Most of it is about the eye. So, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity because not many people are doing it. There's not a lot of, I don't think a lot of creative kinds of sound design in films or films that really get you to listen. And if you get people to listen, it can be a very powerful experience, I think. And in some ways, 32 Sounds has really done very well for a small documentary. And the response I've gotten has been surprising, that people are so taken with the film. And I think a lot of that is just getting people to listen, really use their ears, and you can have a very big experience that way, I've found.
Now, on this one, you worked with electronic musician J.D. Sampson.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit how that collaboration came about? Was
Yeah.
someone that you envisioned working with from the beginning?
Well, I had always been a fan of JD's music. She's great and has been in bands and that I've liked. And I made a piece for a art show in New York City, and I needed a live music, somebody to make a live score, and somebody knew JD and put us in touch. And we got along really well, and I love the sounds that JD makes. I mean, every musician kind of has an emotional palette to their work, and JD's really got me. There's something in her music that resonated with me. So at some point I said, hey, you want to work with me on a documentary about sound? And I think JD might still regret that because it's 5 years later and we're still we're going to be in Portland in a couple weeks doing a live show, and it's sort of endless. But I have been very inspired by JD, and JD also is a great muse. And unlike most composers, JD is in the movie several times. JD is a great performer, so I really like filming JD. JD's smart about sound the way a lot of musicians are. So it was a terrific collaboration, from my perspective, at least.
You mentioned you've got a show coming up in Portland, and the cool thing about this is that you produced two ways for people to enjoy this that suited 32 Sounds experience. One designed to be either completely immersive at home, seen in a theater, how we're going to do it on the 28th. And then the live performance you mentioned. You've done a number of these live shows or live documentaries.
Yeah.
What are the unique challenges to creating these separate related pieces, and how do these live audiences react? What have been what have you come away with hearing from the folks who've been in the audience?
Well, it's funny because it's there's not a lot of models in cinema for this kind of thing. Usually people make a movie and it's a movie, and there's nothing confusing about it. And here there's all these different versions, and we have a version that just screens in a movie theater like a regular movie, and one in a movie with headphones and live narration. There's all this stuff. But when you're making movies these days, you have to realize that everybody is asking themselves, why shouldn't I just watch this at home when it's on Netflix? I do think cinema has a kind of existential challenge these days. And if you can't answer that question, people should watch it at home on Netflix. So I do think that the live version, the version with headphones in a movie theater, is offering something unique. And also it's like a reason to go out. You have a different experience when you see things with a bunch of other people, I think. And often it's a better experience. I have a hard time watching stuff at home. If you're debating whether to see like that challenging documentary, that's you've heard is really wonderful, but is you long. Or Ted Lasso, most people are going to watch Ted Lasso. Maybe even I would too, you know? So having a movie in a theater is a way to make space for people to give themselves over to things that I think at home isn't as easy to do that. So, um, but people, I think people like going out and seeing things. People like seeing things that won't be ever be the same twice. People also like seeing things where you can mess up. You know, there's a certain thing about liveness where it could all go wrong, and there's a charge that comes with that, and electricity that, you know, like you're on a tightrope in some ways, and there's something to that that I think also is interesting.
You know, the Seattle Symphony up here has offered something similar. They have had a series where they've played films on their big
Yeah.
screen and had the symphony play along. And you know, you kind of even the theme of like the Universal, you know, the intro, the pam, ba, like
Yeah.
it that grabs you from the, you know, the word go with these films, and you, man, this is the closest it would be to being in a sound studio with these people creating the soundtrack
Yeah.
originally, and it's such a different experience and so rich.
Yeah, and also, I mean, not to get to sound too new agey here, but it's really true. If you're in a room with a symphony orchestra, the vibrations, just the difference in how that sound works than if it's just coming out of two speakers is, you know, profound. You're being assaulted is not the right word because that's violent. You're being like enveloped and tickled and delighted with sound, you know.
Massaged.
You're massaged. That's exactly it. You're being massaged with sound and all over your body, and it's true. It's a different experience.
Yeah, there's that idea of the shared. We talked about emotion a little while ago, emotion and music and sound. And when you're in a group with people, you're sharing an emotion. It's a shared experience
Yeah.
that just is a synergy. You know,
Yeah.
it's bigger than the sum of the parts, and
Yeah.
it's
Like if you go to a comedy or a scary movie, if other people are laughing out loud, you laugh out loud. You know, if you're just at home, you're kind of like, I don't laugh out loud at home. You know, it doesn't make any sense. Anyway.
well. On the other hand, so we talk about humans and human emotion.
Yeah.
Something that's at the forefront of any subject these days, especially in the world of filmmaking, is AI. And
Yeah.
we talked with Greg Barbanel a little while ago, who's a Foley artist, worked on Breaking Bad and some other top end shows, and we asked him about what his feeling was, whether AI could replace Foley artists or sound designers. And I'd like to get your take on that as someone who's now kind of intimate
Yeah.
with creating sound on film. What your
Well,
thought is on that?
it's interesting because there's a Foley artist in 32 Sounds, this great woman named Joanna Fang. And I learned a lot about Foley in filming with her. I mean, I'd known some, but she said at some point, she said, you know, all the sounds I make, you could get in a sound library now.
Mm.
But they are not, you know, if I am doing footsteps for somebody walking down a hallway and they're scared, I will perform that. There's something in my version that has an element of emotion in it that if you just get from a film library, they're neutral. You know, they're not going to have the appropriate feeling. And you might think like, God, what difference would that make in the sound of footsteps? But it does. You know, that's a very subtle but significant thing, and I believe it. I believe there's a difference there. And so I kind of feel, I mean, many people are like scared about AI, and I'm certainly scared about it in many aspects of life, but not necessarily in cinema, because I do feel like there's so much creativity, so delicate, so mysterious, so unique to every person. I defy AI to come up with 32 sounds, you know, like to dream up this movie. And if it did, you know, like then more power to it. You know, it's I would hand over the keys, you know, if an AI could make this film, but I can't see it happening. I mean, sure, there are probably ways in which it could make a neat video for my iPhone, or, you know, something like that, or a very, you know, by the book sort of film based on very derivative work. But great films are like, you know, like a spark that comes out of nowhere, and I don't see that happening.
Yeah, it's funny. Your answer, or your Foley artist answer, was the exact same thing as Greg's. As long as there's
Okay.
as long as there's footsteps, there's
Yeah.
always going to be a need for a Foley artist.
Yeah.
I'm curious. You talk about this experience of sound and how it's often very passive. If you ever had an opportunity to, like I have, I've seen films where they've removed soundtracks. And you've just got the dialogue and the action you're seeing on screen, and you don't
Yeah.
realize, especially in a film that's maybe a thriller or a horror movie, something like that, how much that plays into the emotions
Oh,
you're
yeah.
feeling. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you have a couple of movies that that you return to again and again for the experience of the soundtrack? Something that, or maybe the first time you noticed, man, this is really
Yeah.
affecting me emotionally. When you were watching a movie.
Yeah. I mean, there's that classic Godfather scene. This really keyed me, and probably thousands, hundreds of thousands of other people had the same epiphany. The scene where he goes in and kills the other person in the restaurant, and there's the elevated train sound, and it's such a powerful scene, and you watch that, and then later somebody tells you there's no elevated train here, it's all Walter Murch dreaming this stuff up, and you're like, what? I could have sworn there was a shot of the elevated train, and you go back and look, and there's not. It's all, and the sound isn't even realistic. It's not as if, it's this impressionistic thing that you don't. The first time I saw it, I just accepted it, but once you look at it, you're like, wow, there's a lot of artifice there, and I bought it. It's sort of, there's an emotional truth to it. So that was an early film sound moment. But then, so I worked on this film with Mark Mangini, this guy who's like a real Hollywood sound guy. He did Dune, he did Mad Max, he's done, tons of movies, and he's really smart about sound. And I watched a lot of his films and was pretty knocked out by that. There's like The Conversation's a great film. There was the movie maybe 4 years ago, Sound of Metal, I thought was actually a great movie soundtrack, or sound design, because it's that thing where it didn't overwhelm you. It left space. I mean, I think that's the thing that I'm most struck by. Most movies do not leave you any space for quiet. And if it's just all climax and big, like, there's not a lot of dynamics. If you have big and quiet, then both are even more, if the dynamics adds like power. I don't know. You were about to say something.
I was about to. What you were saying, it reminded me of Gravity when I watched that. And I watched that, I think, in IMAX and surround sound, the whole deal, and how the absence of sound was almost just as impactful as the sound itself.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that.
So you're going to be in Portland, our sister city, here in a couple of weeks with your
Yep.
live show. What projects are coming up next for you? How can our listeners and audience best keep up with your work? And is 32 Sound streaming? Where can we find it? We're going to see it at the Gig Harbor, the Galaxy, on the 28th here. But for those listening from elsewhere,
well, we are. You can just go to 32sounds.com and see where it's showing. It's funny, I mentioned this earlier, it's been surprising to have like a very weird independent documentary that in some small way is like a breakout hit. I mean, it's definitely not Barbie or anything like that, but it is still going. It showed for 9 weeks in New York City at the Film Forum, which was like a big, wow. And so we're still doing lots of screenings, and so there's that, and it'll probably in the fall be on iTunes and all that stuff, but we're gonna kind of keep pushing with this as much as possible, and we're doing a lot of the live shows still, so that's going. And then I just started a new movie at the very beginning, like, if it's a marathon, I just like tied my shoes and took a couple steps, so I'm very early, but as if making a movie about sound wasn't hard enough, as a movie with no protagonist, no conflict, no chronology, none of the things you'd need for a movie. I'm making a movie about trees, so I'm very excited about that. And you guys probably have good trees out there.
Yeah, we do. Let us know when you come to our neck of the woods. We got them all up here, and they're still green, no matter what time of the year you're here, which is nice.
That's great.
Well, this has been a real pleasure. By all means, stay in touch.
It's my pleasure.
We'd love to connect, and we're really excited to see, again, this is playing at the Gig Harbor Galaxy in partnership with the Gig Harbor Film Festival on the 28th of August.
Cool.
We'll be there bringing our whole family to see it, and we're really stoked for that. So thanks for spending some time
All
with
right.
us today.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Sam.
you, much appreciated. A pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you again to our guest, Sam Green. Wonderful conversation with a very talented filmmaker. You can find his website at samgreen.to. That's samgreen.to. Green, Green. And you can see 32 Sounds at the Galaxy Uptown Theater in Gig Harbor, thanks to the Gig Harbor Film Festival. That's Monday, August 28th at 6:30 p.m. as part of their Film Festival's monthly movie series. We'll be there with the whole family, so hope you can join us. More info can be had at gigharborfilm.org, and you can get advance tickets at galaxytheaters.com. Thanks for joining us.